High value.
Anybody online? I would like to call to order the Urban Renewal Agency meeting with the Economic Development Committee to order at 6 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by Economic Development Committee, David Sedaris, George Hafman, Brian Rosenthal, Carl Fenstermaker, and Christine Turner, and our complete six-person board. Still nobody online? Okay. First, I'm looking for an approval of the agenda. Motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
move to approve the agenda as presented.
you. Any seconds?
I'll second.
By Councilor Holmes. Any question, discussion? All those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Anybody with public comment before I read my whole spiel? Okay, public comment is now closed. Now we're looking at approval of our minutes. Our minutes are August 7, 2023 Urban Renewal Agency meeting minutes. Motion to approve last minutes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Council President
we
Grice.
move to approve the minutes as presented.
A motion by Council President Greisen to approve the minutes as presented. Any second? Second by Councilor Miller. Any discussion? All those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, on to old business. Tonight we're looking to review and discuss the grant program criteria and application form. Jay Johnson, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners and EDC. So we're here tonight as a continuation of our review of the grant program and application guidelines. We spent last time looking really closely at the criteria. This meeting, we're going to really try and focus on the application form and questions. So I want to tie up a few loose ends, though, from discussion points at our last meeting. So we added a few to the projects of primary preference. So one of them being projects in the downtown overlay that exceed the minimum requirements for design or aesthetic features set in the Campus Development Code. So all projects in the downtown overlay are subject to this design and aesthetic code. It's the only form of this kind of criteria for aesthetics that we have for development just in the downtown overlay, but we figure with the boundary of the urban renewal district that a lot of these projects are going to be in the overlay. So if they exceed the minimum code, then we're kind of getting something a little bit extra. The other item that we added was other projects that substantially improve the exterior beauty of the area. This is just kind of the catch-all so that they don't have to specifically meet one of the particular projects laid out in the list as long as it makes a noticeable improvement to the aesthetics of the area. We added in at the request from the meeting projects to, ineligible projects, past debt, the repayment of past debt, and then the reimbursement of past projects. This is really to allow the EDC and the URA to maintain control over what kinds of projects get approved and to what standards. So we wouldn't want someone to complete a project and then retroactively request for grant approval. And then lastly, we heard some conversation about the idea of a scoring matrix. So we did a little bit more research into this. We had taken a look. There aren't many urban renewal applications that have any form of criteria. There were about 7 that the League of Oregon Cities were able to pull together for us. One of them, City of LeGrand, did have like what you would call a matrix, and I didn't include it in the packet because I didn't find it until later, but I do have it here. Could we do like a So again, this is City of LeGrand, and if you look through it, you'll see it's kind of a lot of answers to yes/no questions. So, is it a retail enterprise inside the central business zone? Is it for housing and residential only? And in their system, this is something that staff actually scores and then presents to the Urban Renewal Agency as just kind of informational. In other words, there's not really necessarily a threshold where if you score this amount of points, you get this percentage of your project funded or anything like that. So there's still a lot of room for discretion. So, and at this point, staff doesn't really see this as the most viable path for the Urban Renewal Agency, just because you would want to have a lot more data on, what kinds of applications there's interested in Scappoose. And right now, the agency has only provided grant funding and seen a project go fully through on the espresso machine. So just not the kinds of projects that, we're really looking for the future of the program. So it's sort of hard to gauge like how much points should this, how much points should this be weighted or this, until we have more information on the kinds of projects that people are going to be applying for.
NJ, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you feel like as a committee, seeing the applications first, that coming to consensus without some sort of a scoring guide you'd be fine with that? Okay. Yeah.
I think Matrix actually ties everybody's hands,
Sure.
Right.
yours and ours. It doesn't allow us to.
I just want to make sure that there's a system in place that is functional for you. So.
Yeah, no, that's another thing we felt as staff is that, let's say there's a particular project that, the agency and EDC were really interested in, and the matrix, says that you can't fund it at the level you're really looking at. So with that, are there any other questions about like the program criteria and guidelines before we get into the actual application form?
Brian Rosenthal. I had a couple quick things, and they're not big. Overall, the package looks really good to me. So I think it's so much better than where we were at a while back, and so I'm real happy with it overall. But I would throw out a couple things. In the 50-year plan, there was talk about the desire for more trees, that we don't have enough trees inside of our city. And it does talk about projects for primary preference, and it includes landscaping, but you may want to include some verbiage there for trees not required by site development agreements. In other words, if somebody's going above and beyond, it may not have a big impact, but I think it would at least push people in that direction. Somebody sees criteria and they think, oh, well, I could maybe add another tree here. Didn't have to.
I agree.
Is it gonna shake the world? No, but it's something. And we were talking about in the 50-year plan about incremental improvement. This might be an opportunity for some incremental improvement.
And like we were talking about in that meeting, sometimes that might be giving up a parking space. If they're willing to do that for a tree, that might be
Way they get
worth a little something.
they get the tree paid for, and it wouldn't just the trees like an architectural grade tree go anywhere from a couple $100 to several thousand. Tree itself, but there's also other associated costs. So you could one tree might end up costing $10,000 depending on the situation, but it doesn't have to mean just because we're saying that we call out trees specifically, it doesn't mean that we have to approve a $10,000 tree. But it's just a thought if you want to kind of like refocus the city towards being more trees. And then the only other thing I had on there was under projects that are secondary preference. It includes elevators, HVAC, water heaters, communication, wiring, freezers that are built into structure. Those are all features. This is on page 5 of the packet. A little about a third of the way down. Those are all.
Page 9 in red. Are we?
Ours is 5.
Those are the minutes from last.
These are the minutes.
Yours says draft.
Oh,
Oh,
We already talked about that, Brian.
Page 9 is.
You went
to Arizona.
Okay, well then. Okay, I'm good.
yeah,
I don't know. Does page 9 read how
Go to
you'd like
9
it to
now.
read?
Yeah.
Page 9.
yeah, it is still in there.
Still there.
Okay. Well, I would just throw this out, maybe if and it looks like it's been refocused more to things that would benefit the community at large, aesthetically, and also creation of new businesses and improving existing. These items are more in the category of cost of doing business.
We talked-
Okay, so you guys, if you guys are done with it, you're done with it. Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank
But
you.
if it stays in there, then it's still eligible.
Right, no,
Then it becomes you and us to decide, is that
Yeah.
bringing more business?
Tracy.
I guess I would
Tracy.
talk about if the decision hasn't already been made, but the decision missed that opportunity, then I would quiet.
We're just holding these as work sessions, so no decision's been made quite.
Okay, well, I would just throw out there that those types of items are items that, there's only a few exceptions where they would really serve a general benefit to the public. For instance, if you had a restaurant and we were in a recession and their freezer blew up and the restaurant was going to have to close down if they didn't get a new freezer and they didn't have the wherewithal to do it, then that might be an appropriate time for it to keep those people employed, to keep the restaurant in our community. But just to start paying for appliances in general, I don't see the benefit to the community. It's more of a benefit to that business owner.
So being in there though, someone could be coming for an HVAC and you guys could still say no. It's just you're replacing a 30-year-old HVAC and nothing's changed. You're just improving on, you're just redoing one.
I think the HVAC would become the espresso machine.
Yeah, I've replaced 3 HVAC systems in my buildings this year, and I would never have dreamt that it was something that the city should pay for in any way, shape, or form.
If it was something that they really could show would increase, we can quadruple amount of people. I mean, something would have to really show you an improvement or an increased value.
I mean,
Or
so if it's an old,
otherwise we take it out.
Yeah, and so I don't want to drift away from this, but if you go to page 15 of the packet, the red number, it begins to ask, it reads the purpose of the Urban Renewal Grant Program, and then you have to answer the questions, how would the proposed project increase economic activity? And you have to, and then continues on page 16, where you have to address one by one how your project, promotes economic tourism, creates local jobs, attracts new investment. So essentially someone with a straight face would have to write in there.
how you could write that in with a straight face, I guess. So my belief is, wait a second, my belief is you create simple programs that are simple to manage. You don't give people false expectations. What we don't want is people thinking that they can get an HVAC if we're never going to give them an HVAC. But
That was the water.
Christine was very passionate about the water
Yeah.
heaters.
yeah, the
not
hot water heater is the same thing. It's cost of doing business.
Right, yeah.
Focus when our committee originally worked on was and trying to make Scappoose a more visibly attractive environment to do business.
Do you see any of those items that wouldn't, I mean, a walk-in freezer, if they didn't have one now and they wanted to, add a restaurant and they want to, I guess they could find something else to qualify.
Generally, those are walk-in freezers are so expensive that no one's going to add one in if they don't already have one, unless it's a chain restaurant. No small company. I mean, maybe a brewery would be the only exception, that they wouldn't have a freezer, they'd have a refrigerator. But those things are so expensive. Many tens of thousands. If you look at, as recent, if you look at any small restaurants, I actually owned a restaurant. They do not put walk-in refrigerators or freezers unless they're already there, because the cost is prohibitive.
Jeff?
Well, nobody's going to ask for this stuff to repair something that's broken, because it'll take 3 months to get it approved. So, is your restaurant going to do without hot water for 3 months? Probably not. So I think these are all examples of improvements that would stay with the building. Not really something that you would need to continue to operate your business.
You just take out the examples and leave it up to the imagination there? I mean, do you leave the internal equipment that is part of the permanent building would allow for improved performance or new opportunities and leave it at that? And then they have to prove to you, like you said on the later pages, how is it improving our economic activity? It's not, it's just a water heater or an HVAC, then obviously it's not.
I'm, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. President Grice.
I'm in favor of marking off or striking out including and the bullet points. People might say, well, it's a secondary preference. It was on the list. Maybe they'll consider it. If you took them away, I think everybody in the room understands what we're looking for in this application. So to list it on the application might encourage people to try, and maybe by removing it, it wouldn't give them the idea. So the top 3 dark black bullet points, but then remove the symbol.
Because in the second one, internal remodel to improve functionality, I mean, that's still very vague. And someone may say, if I'm doing this, they got to show what it's the economic activity that's going to improve or increase.
Right. Does everyone feel comfortable moving forward with that?
Yes.
I think so.
All right. If there are no more questions, we'll move into the application form.
I do have one question, sorry. So I was not here at the last meeting and perhaps this has been discussed or considered in the past. Is there any way to use the application to also incentivize like green design, energy efficiency, any resource efficiency as well?
That could potentially be a project of secondary preference.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Add a bullet point to that.
We had talked
Yeah.
about this in the past. We were trying to get away from design phase projects because a large percentage of those never come to fruition. And so we give them the money for the design and then they don't ever build it.
Maybe then it's for the actual unit. I mean, is there a way to verbiage?
Yeah, well, green improvements above and beyond code or approval from the city's requirements would be okay.
Would you be able to put in a water catch on your roof that catches water for use within your building
Yeah,
and get it paid for because it's saving water and it's, you'd have to show economic
Go back to
activity that it adds to.
Yeah, I would want it to be a secondary feature. I don't think that would be like the primary request or driver, but maybe if you've got a project that does achieve the goals, but then bonus, you're bringing some resource conservation with it or reuse of materials or something like that.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So Counselor Holmes, would you want the bullet point under, just so we're all, you want it added to the list under primary preference or the list under secondary preference?
Well, wherever it would be most appropriate. Like I said, I don't think that we would
Yeah.
want, people to say, I'm gonna redo my lighting and, I'd like some money for that.
All the
That's not the
LED,
purpose of
yeah.
the grant, right? But if you are redoing like the face outside and you're putting in some energy efficient lighting outside maybe, or,
There's a lot of other programs out there for people who are looking just to improve
Yeah.
efficiency. So yes, exactly.
We
So
could always
secondary, yes,
encourage
but would
them.
not be a primary reason we would want to get.
We noticed you're putting new lights. Have you considered?
To me,
Yeah,
this sounds like secondary just because we've sort of established design aesthetics as the primary purpose, but I think this sounds like second.
I think it's worthy to put on the list and just have people. Makes us look green, yeah.
Right.
Earth
Yeah,
friendly.
how are they going to use that to attract people, right? Are they going to promote the fact that they have these systems?
Sure.
They just-
I think that lends itself to the fact that that needs to be a component, but not the main issue, the main, focus of the grant request.
Good to move on to the form.
I filled out the,
Oh, you did.
I got to the bottom.
Water here?
No. Got to the bottom, page 14 or page 7. Have your business.
Christine.
Has your business received an Urban Renewal grant in the current fiscal year? And then the property owner name and the property owner email. I just thought that was odd. I don't think they're gonna have another one. Okay, and would it be under a different,
A lot of times like business owners like lease through a property owner and we would want both information.
Okay. Then when it talks about how would your project promote any of these criteria,
Mm.
are we trying to get them to check all of the boxes or are these or statements?
So something I wrote down is that I want to find some kind of way to basically say like don't don't write this stuff down with a red face where you would just embarrass yourself by trying to make that case. But
You should put that in there in the fine print.
yes,
Red face comment.
yes. But anyway, like it may not, it may be still a really, really good project that can improve the look and feel of the downtown, but it might not necessarily apply to all of these. So I'll write some kind of disclaimer. in there.
Or statement.
Yeah.
Do you do an either or statement or any or?
You're gonna count, I mean, we're having a pre-meeting with y'all, talk about their application.
Right.
before they actually- Right. No, the process said first,
Mhm.
we put a notice in an email, and then they meet with them, talk them through it, and then they fill out the form.
Just to make sure they're completing the application and that it's an eligible project.
I think you just coach people.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I mean, if you're gonna be beautifying your business, I don't necessarily, that means you're gonna be creating local jobs.
Mhm.
You're still gonna employ the same people, you're just making it more attractive place for people to
Right.
frequent. So if there is, I don't know if the people need to feel like they have to fill out all the boxes. If there does need to be a disclaimer in the beginning, that's kind of,
Yeah.
well, we're hopeful your application meets most of these areas, but I think in the project meeting, you're
Yeah.
gonna say
I agree.
to the best of your ability. And just because you say it won't or not applicable, doesn't mean that your application is incomplete or won't be.
Right.
Right. So yeah, so we're sort of in it right now, but this is it where it asks all of the questions of each element of the grant program purpose. That's really going to be the meat of where decision makers are making recommendations and decisions on whether or not and how much these grant applications receive. And so you're going to be able to look at their answers, and there's I just want to note real quick, there's something on the back of this in the attachments where if people don't find that 3 lines is adequate enough, they can attach a separate page and provide more information that way. But this is really what's going to give you the sense of like how will this project be, an overall improvement for the entire community.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
NJ on page 16, is there a way to make the H on have off the line go to have you received the necessary approvals?
Yeah, I was just counting on that sentence ending in an H.
Okay.
That's a joke.
In a capital.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
The amount of times we say during the day, capital at the beginning, period. Yeah.
Yes.
I believe last time we talked about if the project was going to be completed without the grant funds. To pose the question, like if you get the funding, will you complete the project? And I don't see that question in here, so I'm not sure if that's.
Yeah, we had discussed that, and we decided ultimately that we were going to recommend removing that question because it's sort of an unfair question to ask in a way, because if you're requesting like a $30,000 grant from like a $1 million project, it'd be really hard to make the case that you actually do truly need this grant, but it sort of sets you up for failure if you say no. And so it's just kind of like a murky, unobjective question. And we had discussed a lot of people didn't like the question being in the application when we met in August. So we as staff decided to remove it.
But that question would be posed like when you have that conversation with the applicant.
Somewhat. The other way you can sort of get at that idea is on page 15. It asks what your estimated total project cost is, and then right next to it is the grant request amount. So you can sort of see the portion that they're asking be covered by the project. And if it's 1%, you have a better idea than if they're requesting the maximum 50%.
Have the anticipated completion date.
Mm-hmm.
So, because that's securing those funds, right? They don't get them until they get reimbursed. But if we've awarded them $20,000, that money can't go to anyone else.
That's right.
Right.
So they need to get that completed. Either pay them or then release that money back into the pool.
And right below too, it asks what specific element or elements of the project are you seeking funding for? So this again, kind of, you know exactly what it's going towards and what the city's investing or incentivizing.
Thank you.
Chair, I believe Jeff has a question or comment.
In thinking about something like that, I wonder, should there be a time limit on the grant?
There
as far
is.
as- Okay.
Yeah, 24 months for projects above $15,000 in value and then, or grants, excuse me, not project value. And then below it's 12 months.
And hopefully we'll be working with them a little bit just to make sure they're on pace. I mean, at 18 months, if they haven't even started yet, you just wait to 24 months, or do you talk with them and they may say, no, we pulled it. So now we can release the money back in, kind of like what Light Day, I think it. Yes, Christine.
It depends. If it hasn't been through land use yet, it's not. It takes time even after they're through land use approval to put their construction documents together to get that review done, et cetera. They may be waiting on weather. So I think if it's a new project, like a new build, they would need that amount of time. Especially to have already spent the money and then be reimbursed. So
Smaller awards are
smaller,
less time.
that's right.
And
Yep.
hopefully if that's a beautification project, they won't want to wait, maybe until spring or until summer or something, but
Mhm.
you don't want to, yeah, on the smaller ones, we would hope they'd go quicker.
I don't know if we want to go here or not, but I know with some stuff like there's timelines where the city has to process an application in a certain amount of time. And do we want to give that, you want to build that into this package, or do you feel like it's too confining? The benefit to it is that the applicant then knows that they'll get a yes or a no in a fixed amount of time, which would be beneficial to them. But this isn't going to be the top thing for the city to deal with. So if something else comes up that's really important, it might get pushed back a little. So I don't know how you guys feel, but it's something to consider anyhow.
Within 90 days of a completed application or something that they should get an answer. I mean, do we leave it open? I don't.
Alex, I'd want you to weigh in on that if that's realistic to promise that.
Does concern me a little bit only because you're talking about initial intake with staff and that depends on our workload. Then you have the scheduling for EDC, which is the next meeting, which depending on when it comes in the month could mean that they wait almost a month for that. Then from there, it gets kicked to the Urban Renewal Agency meeting and, we do schedule these on an as needed basis. They aren't just set at every council meeting. And so it could be months before we could get one into the queue. So it does concern me a little bit to put a really tight timeline on it.
The other thing too is that we've before had a history of, an application comes in and then the agency asks for more information. So that adds time
Right.
too. And that wouldn't necessarily be on the applicant to do the work in that amount of time.
I want us to move on them though and not take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Once they've gone through the meeting with you, submitted the letter, feel that they've got everything answered and they fill a good application out. It'd be nice to be able to try to, especially if it's just a beautification project, it's not going to take them a long time and they have a 6-month window to get it done. It'd be nice to do those a little quicker.
I think maybe perhaps like on, I can't remember the exact page, but it is page 11 of the packet. This lines out the process. It might this might be an opportunity to add some language like, the city and the Urban Renewal Agency will make, a good faith effort to quickly schedule the necessary meetings for approval.
Sure.
You do have number 6 does say scheduling conflicts scheduled 3 or 4 months out.
Mhm.
Time the application is deemed complete. You're giving them some
Mhm.
warning.
Do-
Yes.
you could put language in there saying that you'll try to do it in 90 or 120 days, but there's no guarantee depending on scheduling, just to give them a more kind of, goal everybody's shooting for.
Yeah.
But
I think that the 3 to 4 months is already in there, and
it's okay.
yeah, this may be scheduled 3 or more months out from the time the application's deemed complete. I think we could add, like, the city will make a good faith effort to quickly schedule.
Right. And maybe if we know the application is coming ahead, a month ahead, that, hey, this is in the works, then you can maybe see it out there in 2, 3 months, maybe.
So I think kind of what I've been referencing is that council's work sessions have been scheduling almost 6 months out at a clip. So, could schedule a special meeting. There's other things you could do if something really needed to be moved along quickly. And we'll do our best to get things moved in, but I'm just throwing it out there that, I mean, we have work sessions and into the new year at this point.
There's already an
scheduled, so.
urban renewal agency meeting. You see it 3 months out.
So we don't schedule urban renewal agency meetings as standing meetings on your schedule.
Okay,
They're
have
only,
one to see if you got one to look at another application and one comes in, are you?
we
gonna-
could start, if one comes in and we think it's viable, then we will start looking at that point. But these are typically scheduled during the work session periods of council meetings, so they do have to be planned out usually pretty well in advance.
You're asking a number, right? That the application to ensure all necessary components. Is the components all on page 18? Page 18?
Is that the checklist page?
Right.
And yes.
Okay. Just a technical thing. If component, maybe you want to call it out submittal checklist.
Okay.
Kind of the same thing.
I think that makes sense.
It is the middle checklist. Oh, in
On-
number
She's
4.
saying on number four
four.
to call it that.
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it seems like there's quite a lot of steps in having to complete the grant application. Like number one, we have to submit a letter or an email. Isn't it enough like they would just come in and pick up the application, or you just don't want a lot of people coming to get the application?
Just, I mean, with all the coordination of meetings that we've been talking about, we would want to at least be aware, so that we could start, thinking of this ahead of time, that someone's putting together an application. That's really what that's for.
Because the intent of the EDC to partner with the Urban Renewal Agency in getting this grant out is that we're going to go out and canvass the businesses. So going through saying, hey, if you would just complete number one and then do number two, they're just a way to make it a little easier for them. I'm just thinking about like the guy that owns the Chevron. He may not want to have to submit a letter or an email.
I think it'd be fine to add like
Contact the city
yeah.
in some way.
I think that'd be fine.
But sometimes people are nervous about submit a letter.
Right.
I do want you to, meet or look at the letter because if you just get an application, there's going to go back and forth. Filled out properly.
Right.
You need this, you need that.
No, I think the consult is definitely beneficial.
So if scheduling is a bit challenging, because our work sessions are so busy, does it make sense to maybe not have a rolling application? Like maybe have 2 application deadlines a year? So you're really kind of getting people through the process at once and have a batch. So when you do convene the urban renewal group, we've got a number of applications to look at. Or was there a reason for the rolling application?
This was actually discussed at our August meeting, and what we ultimately came to was that we wouldn't want to slow down a project if it came in on the rolling basis and saying that, if you submit, you might have to wait for 5 or 6 months. But that's certainly open. We could look at that.
It sounds like they might wait for 5 or 6 months anyway, right? And if we just know we've got like 2 meetings definitely scheduled to be evaluating the applications that come in and then on an as needed basis do the others.
That makes sense.
But we'll be reviewing them. And I thought the whole idea of partnering with the EDC is that we would make it a little bit easier for you guys and just make our recommendations, you review it. And so it wouldn't take a full work session. It wouldn't take an hour.
And like with CEP, we do that, there's a deadline. Have them all in a certain time, we review them, and then if you did have some kind of a deadline, you could then go out and market that deadline, saying, hey, in 2 months, we're gonna have our deadline, so they could try to get it out at that time.
I kind of like that idea. I might throw out maybe 3 times a year, just so it's not quite so long, but there's a real benefit. And that is if we get multiple applications and we have limited resources, it allows us to see who's the most just. Because there may be something that kind of meets all the criteria and they get it in, on month 2 of the cycle. So we have the money, it meets most of the criteria, but then something really juicy comes along a month later, but we've already given away the money. So we may not have the resources. So by batching them, it would actually give us an opportunity to look at each of the program, the requests on their merit, not just individually, but as compared to the other options.
The first ones are coming into you, EDC. So if we said, April 1st deadline, your meeting would be shortly thereafter. That would be on your agenda to review that batch that came in. Whether we see them, we're not sure when we'll be able to see them. Have to get a work session. Might be a little ways out.
Right, but if you are doing the 3 deadlines per year, then we can schedule those more easily. Versus when it's just, they
Right.
come in whenever and we're just kind of scrambling to put together the meetings at that time as they come in.
Is this the general consensus? Is this what people are feeling, to go to more of a cycle calendar?
I'd rather see if the agency wants to do it on cycles, they can plan, but I think viewing it as they come in and giving people that immediate feedback, we can backlog them and then make a final recommendation before their meeting. But I'd rather get people in and not having them feel like they need to wait for something.
Like if they get it in early,
Yeah,
if they get it in 3 months before a deadline, you guys.
not feel like, yeah,
What if, and I'm throwing this out, like what if the EDC reviewed them on a rolling, but the URA had standing meetings?
Yes.
The only issue with that is that if there's multiple projects and one has more merit than the other, we've already given our recommendation on one. It's
Won't.
off our desk.
You won't give it until we meet.
Oh, I see. You're saying
we can
mean
intake them.
we intake them, we meet them, but we don't give our final.
You just
stuff.
you make your recommendation, but ultimately the final decision rests with
Oh,
them.
no,
and
but
they
I'm
would
saying
wait.
is,
But you'll do it all at once in a packet.
so
before
we'll meet them individually, but we won't give our final recommendation
Yeah.
until we do it in bulk. So
Feedback.
just to keep it moving through the system.
I think
That's fine.
Yeah, I think that.
You could get one in January, one in February. The deadline's April 1st. You'll have 2 or 3 by that April deadline. You'll then recommend one or
Or both, or whatever.
come to us.
Okay, that works.
If people in January don't like our answer, they've got a month to maybe refresh it.
that way we can have set dates in our schedule that we are going to try to look at them.
Yeah, no, that works.
May.
Feel about it.
The amount of the reward or word.
What if someone wants a printer?
It's a printing business. NJ, if it's a printing business.
Don't wait 3 months to tell them.
Okay, so a lot of things have been said, so I want to make sure I'm getting this down correctly. So EDC could bring in the applicant and review their proposals on a rolling basis, but they would just say, thank you for coming. We're not making a recommendation at this point. And then a month or whatever before the URA meeting, they would look at all of the applications they've received in that period and then make their packet recommendation. Is that what I'm hearing?
They would know when they're going to come to us and recommend, so they could say,
Right.
hey, on this date, thank you, we're going to look at it. Months, we're going to take our recommendation.
Okay. Everyone's good with that?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So then just for staff scheduling, they would be scheduling a URA meeting April, August, like every 4,
Basically every 4 months.
okay, and they're gonna batch them to us. How do you guys feel about
Fine.
having those applications sit for?
Potentially, if we don't have set dates,
I
if
feel
we don't have set dates, it could possibly sit that long anyway. We don't have anything
Right.
on the calendar.
It's easier for staff to preset the
Yes.
dates.
For the Urban Renewal Agency meetings, yes,
Yeah.
very much so.
I would time one of the quarterly meetings for you guys right after the start of your fiscal year or whatever, so that you have money available. So there's a new batch of money, so that the money cycle matches the meeting cycle.
I was gonna try to find 3 months that are fairly
Sure.
quiet, if we know of them, but, and then.
There are no quiet months here. I don't know what you're
Not in
talking
December,
about.
but February, you know,
That's the
Sure.
13th month of the year.
Yeah, right.
2, 6, and 10.
Like,
Yeah.
Well, what would be the timeline after goes through, RA?
If it comes to us, we
Mhm.
could vote on them that night, right? Because you're recommending them to us in a work session.
Mhm.
And then we would then talk later in our board, or can you?
So you would get the recommendation from their committee meetings and you would go into Urban Renewal Agency meeting and that you're just treating that like a regular meeting.
Right.
This is, I mean, even technically tonight, I know we're kind of having a work session style meeting, but this is still a regular meeting. You could be making decisions in this meeting.
Yeah, this is urban renewal. This is
Correct.
council.
We have one, it's for the food cart pods. The decision was made to figure out our process, figure out our criteria, and then have them go through the new process.
Our fiscal budget would start with July 1.
Yes.
That's when the money would go in, any new money available after
And
that.
right now, there's about 78,000 sitting in there. So we're coming up on the end of the material that we need to review. I'll point you last to the submittal checklist on the final page, very back of the packet. So I'll have you look through the submittal checklist. Some things I want to point out is that you will have like a visual to look at. So we're going to have them submit their plans. There'll be a detailed written description of the materials and colors they're using, since this is a program to improve the aesthetics of the urban renewal area. And then, yeah, you can get a sense of their construction schedule, et cetera, et cetera. The second one.
If they haven't opened yet. For a new build.
Any other comments or questions?
We have enough to go on. to the
For
next
sure.
step.
This time I do.
All right.
I'm just really concerned about the H.
Hey,
Can fix
that
that.
it. All right. Meeting adjourned.